But let's go straight across to the top story this evening, and of course it comes from the economic survey. Cautious in short-term growth, firm on fiscal prudence and upbeat on the impact of demonetization. That, in essence, are the key highlights of the economic survey that was tabled earlier in Parliament on the eve of the Union Budget. The Chief Economic Advisor tabled the survey, which runs into 14 chapters and 335 pages. And this, remember, is just the first volume, because the second volume will be released in this summer. But to take you through the key highlights, firstly, the survey has pegged growth in FY17 to be between 6.5% and 6.75%. Without demonetization, though, it expects growth to be around the 7% range, and also estimates that the impact of the note ban to be in the range of about 25 and 50 basis points. Secondly, the survey also points out that growth in the next financial year will be around 6.75% to 7.5%, as it expects low interest rates to actually give a boost to the economy. Thirdly, the survey has made a fervent pitch for sticking to fiscal consolidation roadmap. It points out that fiscal activism works in other countries, like the United States, but doesn't quite help matters in India. Fiscal prudence works, and that is perhaps the best course for India. The survey has an extensive 29-page chapter on the impact of demonetization, and it admits that growth will take a hit in the short term and informal sector has been majorly impacted. But the survey also projects significant long-term benefits and expects a profound impact on real estate. It also has called for faster remonetization. The survey also makes a case for a universal basic income scheme as an alternative to the welfare model, whereby which will subsume all the various welfare schemes. It says that the time is ripe for discussion, but implementation, however, still some distance away. It estimates that the cost of the basic income scheme will be around 4 and 5% of the total GDP. And finally, the survey makes its case to bring land and real estate under the goods and services tax, argues that the move should be a natural follow-up to the landmark tax reform, that is the GST. Here is the Chief Economic Advisor, Arvind Subramanian, with the key highlights of the survey.
One should tentatively conclude that there will be an impact on GDP. The question is how much? For 2016, we expect real GDP growth to slow down by about 1/4 to 1/2 percentage point relative to the baseline. I think it's also fair to say that given the way GDP is measured in India, recorded GDP will underestimate the impact on the informal sector. I think there should be a fast remonetization, and the earlier that we withdraw the limits on cash, the better. I think the impetus to digitalization that the government has provided must be continued, but I think that one must be careful here. The transition must be gradual. It must be inclusive, because there are lots of people who are not digitally connected. I think we must be very mindful of them. I have a preference mostly for doing this via incentives rather than controls. An absolutely natural follow-up to GST is to bring land and real estate into the fold of the GST, which will just, that one source of Kala Dhan, black money, which is real estate, bringing that into the GST with all the self-compliance that happens would be a huge benefit. In the same spirit, reducing taxes and stamp duties. And of course, we need to have a clear, stable, non-discretionary tax administration to allay any fears people might have in the aftermath of demonetization. What is the outlook for next year? Given the range we've given this year, I think we expect it to be in the 6.75%, 7.5% range for next year. I think the pickup, I think, as I said, the effect on GDP will be temporary. I think as remonetization happens, the economy will recover back to trend next year. Catch up in consumption as remonetization happens. A pickup in exports is something that can get the economy back to trend next year. This UBI, I think it's a very radical new idea, but again, please do not misreport the survey as saying that the survey is advocating UBI. What the survey is saying is it's a very new, compelling idea. It has a lot of challenges. So it's an idea whose time is ripe for further deliberation and discussion, and not necessarily for immediate implementation.